So my product process really varies depending on what work I'm doing. Right now I'm doing a lot of work that has kind of been laid out for me. So there's a lot of pieces that I know that I just need to do. So in those cases, it's a lot of starting to rethink. I start to put, start to write out what it is. These days it's usually a Google Doc, but start writing out some specs, writing out some ideas. A lot of times I'll then take it and usually vet that with an architect or a dev lead. Make sure that I'm like, do they see anything that I'm missing in the piece of work that I'm doing or the requirements that I'm documenting. Start to try to, if I have UX designers to do wires or visuals of any sort, then working with them. I've worked in places that I haven't had that as well. So doing some of that myself to kind of think through that. And then really kind of talking to others. In Slack, I've got a couple key client service managers and a professional service director that I work with on a regular basis, and I kind of hit them up for questions. So do you want it this way or do you like it this way? Or what do you think the clients would need? And by no means is it a formal process, but it gives me some informal feedback so that I can start to steer where the direction of exactly the product is going to go. At this point, everything goes in Jira for the most part. So the Google Doc is kind of the base. It gets merged into Confluence to kind of be the kind of historical data and can get evolved. But then a bunch of user stories get created with acceptance criteria and the details around what that looks like. Ideally figuring out if it's a single sprint, multiple sprints, what the order of those tickets need to be, and really working with the development team on how to kind of get that through, and then figuring out kind of when that deliverable will happen, depending on what that piece is. And then for the most part, if everything in Jira is written really well and all the documentation's there, I'm now moving on to the next thing and kind of watching it and answering questions as we go. And then kind of once it comes around on the other side and comes into QA or one of the environments that I can actually look at and start to play with, I can then give feedback and go through it, comment on it, and then get it out the door, and then get release notes out, and then again move on to the next thing. Or if I need to, which probably happens more than you'd like to admit, but there's pieces that don't make it, or you hit it out, get it out the door, but you realize that there's a couple use cases that aren't accounted for, and they're ultimately not launch blockers. So you kind of work through those and figure out how do those get back in the pipeline so that you can get that out the door. I think historically, you do these monolithic, 3-6 month projects, and you roll them out as after 3 months, and you did, if you did a deployment or a release a month, it was a big deal. And you release things in these huge monolithic projects or pieces of functionality. And it was a lot harder to come back and optimize one little piece of work. But with kind of the way that methodologies have changed, and with process and sprints and agile or Scrum or whatever you're using, being able to recognize that that little ticket can just roll into the next sprint. We can get it out the door. It's not the end of the world. Yeah, maybe this one use case isn't accounted for, but it's not going to break the experience to a point where people are going to be super frustrated. And then you just go, okay, let that piece of functionality, that product out the door, and come back and fix it. And you have that flexibility to fix it because the process allows for it.